Only what you do for God will last for eternity. This quote recently stopped me in my tracks. I was reading chapter 4 of the book we're talking about in this series called Leadership Not by the Book by CEO and founder of Hobby Lobby, David Green. Part of the summer series that we're doing right now, 12 weeks talking about godly business leadership. If you're just seeing this for the first time, I highly recommend you go back and start with episode 1 and watch them in order. So I'm going to go ahead and put the link to the first episode right up here so you can just click right there and go back and start from the beginning. There are so many places I could go with this concept. Only what you do for God will last for eternity. I'm going to try to stick mostly to the inspiration of what he's talking about here in context, but I'd love to hear your thoughts, like what came to your mind first when I said that. But let me just start with our Bible verse that ties into this whole concept, this whole theme first, and it's from Philippians. Again, I feel like we've been in Philippians a fair amount this series. Um, in the NLT translation, Philippians chapter 2, verses 3 through 4. Don't be selfish. Don't try to impress others. Be humble, thinking of others as better than yourselves. Don't look out only for your own interests, but take an interest in others too. Before we dive too deep into this topic, if you like this kind of content, take a minute, subscribe to the channel, like the video, and then just share this with another fellow Christian business owner that you think they might be interested in this kind of topic and this kind of conversation as well. Okay, so like I said, there's a lot of places I could go with this quote and this concept, but the context in the book is more about how important it is that our work, whatever it is that we're doing, whether you're, selling products or you're like me and you're providing more of a service, that it has a primary focus on the human soul, and that our main purpose, our main point is that we are trying to impact the world for God, and that in however we are conducting our business, it is leading back to and shining a light on God and God's love. Now, David's perspective is obviously one that I can't relate to directly, and you probably can't as well. He's the perspective of a CEO who has thousands, probably tens of thousands of employees. And if you're like me and you don't have tens of thousands or maybe even one employee, then, it may feel like it wouldn't be applicable, but I think it still is. I think I still got a lot out of this chapter. Um, what he's really getting at is that he's a leader that cares more about the souls of his employees and his customers and his colleagues than he is about his bottom line. It's not that the bottom line isn't important. It's not that profits aren't important. We obviously talked last week about the importance of tithing from our profits and things like that. And if you don't have any profits, then you obviously can't tithe from them. So, I mean, obviously, it's not that the bottom line isn't important. It's just not the most important thing. But I think even though we don't have the tens of thousands of employees, I think this applies to us maybe more than we realize. In every encounter we have as a business owner, we have an opportunity to have an impact on another soul for the positive or the negative, right? The way that we interact with people is shining a light, good or bad, on God. Now, I don't necessarily think that this means that in every single encounter we're meant to share the gospel overtly. Absolutely, there may be opportunities to do that, and being ready and willing to listen to God's call in those moments and step out in faith and do that is wonderful, and I think it's very important. But I think we can always make a priority of sharing God's light and showing God's love to people in every interaction, even when it's just a mundane interaction. That means operating our business a certain way, operating from a place of integrity, giving people the benefit of the doubt, even when we don't feel like it. When somebody approaches us from a place of hostility or maybe even, I mentioned a couple episodes ago about somebody who approached me kind of trying to get me to push my boundaries and get me to allow them to work in a way that I don't typically work, to allow them to schedule with me with less than 24 hours notice and on a day that I don't normally work with clients, and to choose how they're going to pay me when it's outside of my typical process, all of those kinds of things. I could immediately have thought, "Oh, this person's just trying to scam me." And honestly, I that interaction never actually came to fruition, so I don't know if that person was trying to scam me or not. But I gave them the benefit of the doubt of having the conversation anyways while holding firm to my boundaries, right? I can still do that, show God's love in that way, by treating them with that respect and that integrity, and not put myself in a bad situation at the same time. It's just showing up in a way that we know God would and could be proud of, and that we can be proud of. But what this also means is making an intentional effort not to fill up our time with things that ultimately don't matter. Realistically, how we show up with clients and potential clients has a lot to do with the level of stress we feel in our business. This is just a practical side of things, right? I'm not an expert in this, but I know it from my own experience. When I'm feeling stressed about something, and I think about like back when I was a voice teacher, when I first started out as a voice teacher and I was supporting myself with that income, I had no other income coming in. And I would be incredibly stressed out when a student needed to cancel. Because for me, it was like, okay, well, if you cancel, then I don't get that money and then I can't pay my rent. And the reality is that that's my problem, right? That's not my student's problem. As long as they are following my guidelines and my rules and my policies and letting me know with enough notice, then they should be allowed to cancel because either something came up for them or maybe they don't have the disposable income to pay for a lesson that month or that week or whatever, whatever their frequency. And I was not always able to show up with the level of graciousness and generosity that I wanted to, because I was stressed out about it because I didn't have enough buffer, and it had an overarching impact in how I interacted with those people. I was never mean to them, but there were definitely times where I toyed with and in some cases implemented cancellation policies where, um, even when they were canceling within my policy, they had to give me some money anyway. And it wasn't because that's how I wanted to be. It was because that's how I needed to be because I was so stressed out about it, right? I wasn't building a business in a sustainable way that allowed me to show up as the person that I wanted to be. What that does is frees me up to be able to see those opportunities where I can show up in that way. I can care more about the impact on the human soul than on the bottom line in my business. One of the quotes from this chapter, I think it's the only quote I'm going to bring up here actually, because I think it's really, really meaty, is he said, "What activities consume your attention right now that won't matter in 100 years?" Oh, so many. They're going to be different for you and for me, of course, because our businesses are different. Our priorities are different. We are different. But I'd be willing to bet that just like what happened for me when I first read that quote in this chapter, when I just said that, something popped into your mind. That thing that you spend way too much time doing in your business. But I think more importantly than just how much time you're spending doing it, there's a word choice that he made here that I think is incredibly important, and I don't want to gloss over it. He said, consume. He said, what activities consume your attention? Not have your attention, not even occupy your attention. Consume. Consume implies obsession. It implies an unhealthy obsession, in my opinion. And I may or may not have that level of unhealthy obsession with my YouTube analytics. It's something I'm working on. I'm consistently, intentionally working on. But as a leader, I'm learning through this book and through prayer and through my time in the Bible that I don't I don't need to and I shouldn't be so focused on short-term goals. It's not that short-term goals are bad or they don't matter at all or whatever, but ultimately the short term isn't the point. The long term is the point. And we're talking long, long, long term, right? Because we're talking about those things that we do for God that impact eternity. And that is showing up in a certain way, planting seeds by being a different kind of business leader than the world would be. Even if we don't overtly have conversations with people about our faith or, share the gospel to them specifically, showing up in those ways makes them curious. It plants a seed. It might cause them to ask questions or do research or even internet stalk us a little bit because they're curious why we're different than other people. So I just want to encourage both of us that whatever just popped into your mind, and for me right now, YouTube analytics and probably other things, but whatever that was, let's both work on putting those things back into the place where they belong. Not a place of elevated importance, because in reality, it's not going to matter in 100 years. It's not going to matter in 50 years. In fact, it might not matter in 20 years. They certainly don't matter to the level that we're making them matter and allowing them to cause stress and create less space for us to show up the way that we're meant to and put people as the highest priority, their soul and their eternity. As a godly business leader, that should be our top priority, whether they are employees, colleagues, customers, whatever it might be. With this podcast, I created a space in my business where I could overtly share my faith, but I know that opportunities to share my faith and show God's love to everyone that I encounter are still present in all areas of my business, and I know they are in yours as well. So how are you going to step out in faith and create opportunities or be obedient in the opportunities that are presented to you for those around you to know God, to see God in you? How can you do that this week in your business? As always, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this in the comments. And I'm already starting to think ahead to a future series, what I'm going to do after we talk about this book. So if there's a specific overarching topic you'd want to dive deeper in conversation, like godly business leadership, but something else, let me know in the comments, because I'm always looking for things that you guys want to talk about as well. But make sure that you come back next week, where we're going to start talking about the people-centered practices that help us to become better godly business leaders. Thanks for watching this episode all the way to the end, and I hope that you liked it, and more importantly, that you found it helpful. If you did, make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share this video with another Christian business owner that you know is going to love it as much as you did. God bless you.